Good afternoon. Welcome to the alternate format. It's great to have you here. And today I've got kind of a little bit of a different topic. On the heels of the value of a TJ. I put that video out, several weeks ago. And it kind of piqued a little bit of interest. So I was in conversations with my neighbor the other day as I was working on the LJ in the garage, and he noticed I had a couple Jeeps in there, and he was really curious about kind of the Jeep life, I guess, if you will. He was curious as to, the different Jeeps and how to really get into the community, I guess. And he asked me just a boatload of questions, and a lot of them centered around kind of what Jeep to buy. He really had no clue kind of where to start. He was pretty confused with the different models and the different years and kind of what the differences were and those types of things. So I wanted to take a little bit of time today and just walk through kind of the iterations and then why I pick the TJs as kind of the moniker of the Life of a Dad household. So first of all, the history. I'm not going to go really deep into it at all. If you're really curious about the history and the timeline and how the Jeep evolved, there's on Car and Driver, they did a really, really good article. And this is the visual history of the Jeep Wrangler. And I'll put this link in the description to this article. And what it does is it actually walks through all of the Jeeps from, basically the beginning to now. It tells kind of the story of the merger to Kaiser, the buyout to AMC, the buyout to FCA, Chrysler, and kind of the iterations of the Jeeps and, kind of the changes that were made. So for today, in the short time that we have, what I want to kind of concentrate on is the YJ up to the JK. So from 1987 to basically 2018. There's a bunch of iterations in there, and there's kind of some big differences that really make a difference on which Jeep you want to choose to maybe buy as your first one. So really the fundamental question that you need to ask is, what are you going to use it for? A lot of people just, use it as a daily driver, and then on the weekends, take it out to, there's some parks out here close by, Creekside and some other ones, these off-road parks. They're getting more and more predominant. Colorado, Arkansas, there's a bunch of mountain trails, and then obviously getting up into Moab and stuff like that. So, and then there's degrees of those trails. So, off-road, meaning just kind of gravelly road, maybe some winding through the trees, hills, those types of things. And then you get into the rock climbing and, steep grades and mud and all that sort of stuff. So there's that aspect. Then there's also the aspect of, are you just going to use it as a daily driver around town? Going out for dinner, going to the friend's house, taking the top down, going out to bingo and the movies and going to the beach and just hanging out. Then you don't necessarily need the off-roading capabilities that Jeeps are notorious for. A stock YJ or CJ or TJ or a JK might just be kind of up your alley. So there's a lot of aspects to look at when you want to buy it. But let's take the confusion out of all the different monikers. And to start, we're going to go to the YJ. So this is kind of where my story begins. When I was first looking at a Jeep, I was actually looking at the YJ. And the reason is because I just like the simplicity of it. There's not a lot to it. The exterior's pretty plain Jane. Got the rectangular headlights, which is really the only one that has it. From 87 to 96, 95 was the only one with the rectangular headlights. So it has kind of its own unique style. The interior is kind of the same, I guess, for lack of a better explanation. It's simple. There's nothing really to it. It's got the straight dash across with some gauges. You probably got a radio in there. And then you got some vent that might have heat and all that stuff in it. But it's really just kind of just a bombing around kind of a vehicle. This one came in some different iterations of engine sizes, from the 2.5 liter, the 4 liter, and actually I think it's a 4.2 liter carbureted engine was in that. And all those came through the iterations from the CJ. A lot of the drivetrain carried forward. The big thing that separates this going into the next iteration, and this is why I didn't buy one, is the suspension. This has, you know, the same kind of axles, the Dana 30s, the Dana 35s, the Dana 44s, but the big difference is, and you can see them here, the shackles. It's riding on leaf springs. So if you've, you know, I'm probably going to age myself, but riding in the back of a pickup truck when we were kids, you know, bouncing down the road, and I literally mean bouncing. We were trying to get up close to the cab so that you literally didn't fly out the back. That's what it's like in riding around in one of these. It's not kind of a daily commuter in urban life, in my opinion. You know, going over potholes, it's stiff and it's rough in its stock form. I know that there's a lot of aftermarket stuff that you can put onto to convert it to springs and shocks, and you know, all these kits. Lifting it is a whole different ball game. There's you know, it's just different for the average consumer looking to get into the Jeep world. I wouldn't go down the YJ route. This is kind of a modder's dream, really, in my opinion. If you're looking to make some serious modifications, then the YJ might be the way to go. I've seen some serious rigs out on the trail that can, you know, just pretty much do anything. So that's kind of the YJ and its difference. It's simple. It doesn't have any of the creature comforts. It's just a go into the bush, go camping kind of rig. Maybe driving around town, but definitely not a daily driver. All right. Then you get into the TJ. So the TJ introduced, let's start on the exterior. This one is, you know, a 97 or a 98. I think in 99 they changed the rims. So, and you can tell by the mirror it's squared off, and you know, this is definitely one of the early iterations, if not a 97. The big difference that they made from the YJ to the TJ is the drivetrain remains the same. The engine options were the 4-liter and the 2.5 in the fuel injected, and then it has the AX15 or the AX5 or the NV automatic one, the 3-speed automatic. I can't remember the acronym on it, but it came in those options. So the axles remain the same, the Dana 30, 35, 44, which came stock in whichever trim you were buying. And the big difference is the articulation and the stiffness of this vehicle. The frame, they stiffened it up almost, I think it's 100%. And the body was like another 33% or 20% or whatever it was. They added the torque boxes and really give it some rigidity to go with the springs and the shocks. So the articulation was like 7 inches over the YJ. So in this picture, it's showing off its fancy flex, the couple inches that it's doing. So it really had an advantage over the YJ because it didn't add length and bulk. It just added rigidity and more flex, which really appealed to the off-road people. So then when you get into modding, or you want to do a lot more four-wheeling, this is why I gravitated towards the TJ. It's lightweight, it's nimble, and you can add lift, you can add bigger tires, axle swaps are, you know, generally easier. And there's so many bolt-on modifications to the TJ that it just makes, you know, it's endless what you can do with it. And that's kind of another thing of what you're buying it for. Me, I'm a hobbyist. I love mechanics. I am not a mechanic by any stretch of the means, but the Jeep in its simplicity makes it easy. From the 4-liter and the 2.5-liter engine configurations, they're so simple. They're inline. There's not a lot to them for timing and swapping parts and, you know, figuring out issues. My wife and I did 2 engine swaps in the garage, as well as we did a piston change because one of the piston skirts broke. And we literally did it in frame and ran it for I don't know how long before we finally did an engine swap because the oil pressure the engine was just wore out. So for a hobbyist mechanic, they're really easy to work on. Parts are readily available and they're inexpensive. So that's the TJ. I know I spent a little more time on that one because it's kind of my forte. I love that thing. Okay, the interior. This is also one of the big upgrades they did over the YJ. They added a little bit more creature comforts and made it a little more aesthetic. Added airbags, which is a big thing if you're not into off-roading, extreme off-roading. As a daily driver, it added a lot of safety features. This one looks like it's a 97 because it's got the slider heat and air conditioning. The 98s to 06 actually went to the dial. They got the 3 dials. So obviously the cassette player was updated to CD and those types of things. This is the 3-speed automatic. This is the same one that my wife has, the blue one. And it will literally do 75 miles an hour down the freeway without even blinking an eye. And that's with the 307 gears in the rear and 30-inch tires. I think these ones came factory with about a 28-inch tire-ish, 27-inch. So it really made a leap over the YJ. Just from a creature comfort standpoint, from comfortable ride, the springs and the shocks just took it up over the edge. And it really put it into the mainstream daily driver. Okay, so then all through 97 to 2006, there was a bunch of iterations. But really there was only kind of 3 major changes, I guess. From 97 to 02, you had the 2.5 liter and the 4 liter, actually all the way through to 06. But the big thing was they made a Rubicon edition in 2003 for the last 3 years of the TJ lifespan. And that added more off-road capability. It added differential lockers and a beefier transfer case, beefier suspension, bigger tires out of the factory, 30-inch and 31-inch, depending on the package. And then the other big change they did was they made the LJ version, which is basically, it's the Unlimited and the Unlimited Rubicon. They really stepped up the game in 2004 to 2006 for those 3 years. Those are basically the holy grails, the unicorns. The Rubicon LJ is one of the most sought after and one of the most expensive. Actually, it is the most expensive in the TJ line. They're going between $20 and upwards of $35,000. I've seen them for, depending on mileage and kind of unmolested. They really fetch a really high dollar. And then there even was a even rarer one, which is the Sahara Rubicon LJ, which had a chrome grille and some other stuff, and there was only 1,000 of them ever made. So there are some really iterations in there, and there's all kinds of swings between the trim levels. Sahara, Sport, the SE, which is the 4-cylinder. They had, in the later iterations, they had the X. And all those is just trims and options. The Sahara being kind of the upper one. It had the green seats. It had cruise and tilt, pretty much as a standard. My Sport actually has cruise and tilt, but it was options that could be added from the factory when you bought it. So it really, again, depends on what you're going to use it for. If you're going to be bombing down the highway, maybe cruise control is your thing. So you might want to look at what that is. All right. And then you get into the JKs. So in 2007, Jeep introduced the 4-door. Everything before that was always only 2-door. You could do different options, half doors that had the full doors. You can do trail doors. But the JKs was now getting into the mainstream daily driver. This has the 4-cylinder and 6-cylinder as well. But when Chrysler bought it, they did away with the AMC engines and they started bringing in their own additions. Till eventually, I think in 2012, they introduced the Pentastar V6, which is pretty much the standard. And in so, they also introduced a lot of the creature comforts, the air conditioned seats and the heated seats and electric seats and all this stuff. It's just the fancy folding convertible tops, all these types of things. They really turned it into a kind of a urban vehicle more than just a weekender out in the bush kind of vehicle. It kind of turned a little bit of a corner. So if that's your thing, now you're into a different ballgame. If you're looking at taking a larger family and you know, all your gear out, and then you might want to step up into the 2007 and above. The reason why I don't gravitate towards them is because they're not as maintenance friendly from a hobbyist standpoint. Because you got all the electronics that are in that, all the beep boop machines and the whirly woos and the, you know, all the things that come with it. Yes, you get the extra horsepower. Yes, you get the extra speed. But in my mind, they're not speed demons. I love my 6-cylinder 4-liter. I can do 75 miles an hour down the highway. Yeah, you know, maybe I have to be a little bit more careful. It's not quite as nimble in traffic as, you know, these little sports cars whipping around, but it still gets the job done. So that's the other kind of side of it. If you're cruising around town and you know, you want that speed and the horsepower, aside from modding a TJ, putting in a stroker and all those kind of things that you can do with those, or doing a LS swap or a Hemi swap, maybe this is more the cup of tea. Now you're going to pay for it. So really quickly, let's talk about cost before I end this thing. The YJs you can pick up for, you know, between $4,000 and $8,000. They're relatively inexpensive in comparison to the TJs. The TJs, for a decent roadworthy one that you can get in and drive, you're going to be in the $8,000 mark. And if you go look at the value of a TJ video that I did several weeks ago, I went through a few of them that I had found on Facebook Marketplace. You're going to start in that 8, 10, 12 grand. If you want to get into an LJ, the longer wheelbase, the more room, now you're getting into the $14,000 to $30,000 range for a 20-year-old vehicle. So that's also the other thing to consider. The JKs, and then the iteration of the JLs, the JKU and the JLUs, they all have their own trims and their own thing. Tanya and I went and looked at a brand new one, a 24 Sahara, with the gunmetal paint, only a soft top, no hard top. Off the lot, it was like 48 plus. By the time I drove it away, it was going to be about 52 grand. And that's factory, not the big tires, not any kind of mods done to it, no hard top, you know, no lockers, none of that stuff. It was kind of the base Sahara. So putting $15,000 down, you're still looking at $870 a month for 5 years. Almost a mortgage payment for a daily driver. If you wanted the Rubicon, because you're going to go out trail riding and going out 4x4, now you're getting into the $60,000, $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 range. And then you get into the 392, now you're well over 100. So at the end of the day, it really boils down to what you're going to do with it. What creature comforts do you want? And what are you willing to sacrifice to kind of do the things that you want? I will say this, the Jeep community is huge. We've been here in Houston for 7 months now, and the people are just great. They really look out for each other. There's a lot of groups around here. Everybody's quick to answer questions, and there's a lot of people that are willing to help and support. So the bottom line at the end of the day is really think about what you want and then research it and come across the Jeep that's right for you. If a starter one like a YJ or a TJ to get your feet wet with, I'm all for it. I will keep buying TJs until the day I die. I think I've got 4. My son's got 1. So I'm sure we're just going to keep going. But I hope you find that helpful and useful. And like always, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for supporting us. The LJ build is still going. I'm so close to that one. I can almost taste it. I'm getting anxious to get that thing on the road and then wrap up the last little bits as it's driving. So we'll be sharing that with you here over the next few weeks. And like, subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.